Hi, I'm Igor Volsky.
And I'm Michele Jawando.
And this is Thinking Cap,
a podcast from the Center for American Progress.
Well, Michele, we're recording this first episode of Thinking Cap seconds after learning that the Justice Department has in fact appointed a special counsel to investigate the Trump campaign's connections to Russia. This is something progressive groups and even some Republicans have been calling on the Justice Department to do for weeks after it became clear that this president is interfering or maybe interfering in the Russia investigation.
In fact, since the beginning of this month, we've seen countless Republicans, former DOJ officials, elected leaders, and more importantly, voices of the American people from all across this country saying, at the very least, we have to have a special counsel. And it seems to me, Igor, that the resistance is working.
And that's what this show is about, the voices and the issues driving the resistance. And we see once again that if you are committed enough, that if you take steps to contact your member of Congress, to tweet and Facebook at your member of Congress, ultimately, you're going to create the political pressure for them to act in the right way.
On this first episode, we had the pleasure of sitting down with a senator who is well known, particularly if you're on Twitter, none other than the junior senator from the state of New Jersey, Senator Cory Booker.
My home state.
That's right. New York, New Jersey, a little tri-state love in the house. Senator Booker, it is an honor and privilege to have you on Thinking Cap on today. When we think about the resistance in this moment, we often think about leaders who started locally and really have built movements. And in a lot of ways, the beginning of your career was revolutionizing something different about local elected politics and what we should be doing to be responsive to our constituents.
Right. Well, first of all, I'm grateful to the two of you who are leaders in your own right, activists and people that I look to for sources of energy. And we're all in this together. We're all struggling. We're all fighting. And we all nurture each other. So I just appreciate your energy. I appreciate you having me on for the first podcast. I'm kind of pretty pumped about that. But, look, if there's anything I've learned is that change doesn't happen in an instant. It really is something you have to stay with all the time. I love Ella Baker, who had a song really popularized by Sweet Honey in the Rock, where they sang, "We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes." Exactly. And so that to me is a mantra. And I've learned this the hard way. I still remember a protest I did when I was a city councilman in the year 2000. There was just a very bad situation at one of our high-rise low-income housing projects. And so I set up this tent. I go on a 10-day hunger strike. We win this victory. The mayor comes out after 10 days, declares he's going to have police out there and that he's going to build a park in the area. And I still remember celebrating it all. And then he never built the park. And then he had police out there for 6 months. But those of us know that doesn't solve a problem. Law enforcement doesn't solve problems, as an FBI director once told me, of New Jersey. That's a hot name to use. I should say the SAC, the special agent in charge of in New Jersey, told me that he said once we treat the symptoms, we don't deal with the real problem. And so, you can't expect one day of activism to solve problems. We all have to be committed servants of this republic, committed patriots that stay with it all the time, that keep fighting and understand that you're going to get setbacks. And I've seen them. I've seen losing brutal elections. I've seen things happen in my community that just are unacceptable, unconscionable, but people pick up and they keep on fighting. And so,
well, along these lines, let me ask you about the moment that we're in with the news of the firing of Comey, with the memo that Comey claims to have of Trump asking him to
and I'm
stop
glad you said that, clarified the moment that we're in.
We
We have just come through 10 days.
Yes, I know.
Where the moment we're in is to be like, hey, Donald Trump let Russian media into his office. Now that's potentially shared secrets, confidential classified information. Or maybe it's the firing of Comey. I mean, or the moment we're in.
Jeff Sessions.
What I'm flipping out about is
the war. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, that to me.
So, given where we are with the Russia investigation, given the fact that it looks like the president tried to obstruct that investigation, what do you say to constituents of yours who are maybe calling you and saying now is the time for impeachment.
Right. So, I mean, I heard impeachment calls from the first days of the presidency, and I think again, in the partisan, understandable partisan rancor, that was something that was said. I think we need now be very careful that we who pursue the facts and the truth just understand that when you get to something as serious as impeachment, and we saw this with the impeachment of Clinton, to allow it to become a proxy for relitigating an election, as opposed to something that should sober us all, that a president of the United States has committed a high crime. I think that we all should have respect for the institutions to make sure if we're doing that, it has nothing to do with our partisanship, but it has to do with the facts of what the president did or did not do. And so where I am right now, I think you phrased the question right. I think that what he's done is pointed towards obstruction, but I think that we have to follow the facts now in a very sobered, objective way. I think the Comey testimony is going to be critical. What other memos does he have? Are there tapes in the White House, which is just stunning to me, even to make a threat like that. But there's a lot of facts and a lot of digging that we have to do. And remember, this is just one investigation. There is an active investigation going on about the Russian influence in our election, possible. They're investigating, was there collusion? They're investigating numerous conflicts that individuals have following the money. So there's a lot going on right now. I think we're at the point now where I just want to caution folks who are running headlong into impeachment. Don't be that person, because one day we might find ourselves with a Democratic president with people calling on that. Let's wait to see what the facts are, and if the facts indicate there's grounds for impeachment, that's what we should be pursuing. What I just want to say, and again, I could be wrong. I'm trying to prove in my life that someone who tries, I'm not always the nice guy, but tries to be nice and to evidence my values. What's the thing we all heard when we were kids? Nice guys or nice gals finish last. But I'm a big believer, having had my heroes. If you walk into my office right now, you see King, you see Gandhi, you see Harry Tubman. I want to exalt people who the means and the ends were consistent. And I believe that ultimately, in the long game, is what makes this country greater. That people who are caught up in short-termism and that will do anything necessary, regardless of the values or morals, not to mention even the law, I just don't think that's the right formula. And people that want to go down that dark road, God bless you. I understand your justification, but remember, when you go down that road, you're going to take our country down too.
So, Senator, you talked about something. Our CAP Ideas Conference 2017 version was this week, and in your remarks, there was something that this was, I think, one of the first times I've heard you use. I'm a child of the Black Church, AME community, and you weave the story of resistance around old Negro spirituals and hymns.
So much of what we take for granted right now was because of folks like Baldwin who answered the call to do impossible things. You pick a segment of our society, the suffrage movement with its brutality, women literally dying for the cause of our country. Alice Paul, Mary Church Terrell, Elizabeth Cady Stanton. The heroism of labor activists, literally at a time that if you were organizing, you didn't just get a threat to lose your job, you got a threat to lose your life. Nat Turner, Sojourner Truth, William Lord Garrison, civil rights activists whose names aren't even that well known. Like Fred Shuttlesworth had his home bombed, his wife chain whipped, himself stabbed, but kept on fighting for his impossible dream of America. These are our ancestors. This is our roots. People who never surrendered to circumstances, who kept on dreaming. I have to tell you right now, when I hear my mom utter something from Lewis Carroll, and it actually fortifies me as I get on a red eye to fly back to Washington. In my head were the songs from a kid in a black church in Closter, New Jersey, The spirituals that were being sung that my mom would impress upon me, you're hearing those now in the 1980s as a little boy, but those were the songs that sourced us. Ain't nobody gonna turn me around. Ain't nobody gonna turn me around. I'm gonna keep on a walking. I'm gonna keep on a talking, marching down to freedom land.
What took you there? Why did you center your story?
Well, you know, first of all, I'm not saying this to discourage people, so please understand I'm not saying it that way, but a whole lot of folks are taken to the streets now because one man got elected president. And if you go to communities of color that have been impacted, like a Newark or a Camden or a Patterson or a Passaic, you know, folks will let you know that there's been outrageous injustices that have been existing even under President Obama, that have been should anguish the soul of this nation. And you can go back, pick your decade, where despite that, people would continue fighting. And so as a little kid growing up and sitting in the black church and hearing these spirituals and looking at the elders in my community and who were so moved and would hold on to the words of these songs, you know, even some of the ones that most people know, more popularized, you know, we shall overcome, you know, these were calls to the soul that despite the horrific circumstances, despite the oppression, despite the setbacks, we are still going to fight for the cause of freedom. But the beauty of, and again, it's not just the black tradition, it's many American traditions, but the beauty of the black tradition, it's like Mamie Till,
opening up the casket.
Opening up the
of her
casket.
baby boy.
Look at this craven, vicious brutality, and let me use my moral imagination to prick your consciousness and your moral imagination. Take this tragedy and try to turn it into a triumph. You know, you get sermons from people saying, you know, we're going to encounter stumbling blocks, but we must transform this into stepping stones. We're going to encounter barriers, but we've got to somehow transform them into blessings. This is sort of the very stuff of the African American experience. And so that's what I just want folks to know, that this is not a time for despair. Let's sing those freedom songs now. This is a time that we're going to continue going. Ain't going to let nobody turn us around, turn me around. So that's the message I was trying to communicate.
Yeah. We're in this, I think, fascinating time where people are passionate, people are resisting, they're taking to the street, but at the same time, you look at all the polling, all the data, they have very low trust in their institutions, in their government. You know, for me personally, part of the reason why I'm here, why my family was able to come here, was because your predecessor, Frank Lautenberg, opened a channel for Soviet Jews to come to the United States. And it's part of the reason why I've always been interested in politics and policy, because it had a very direct impact on me, very direct impact on my life and my family. And you know, I was, I think, very inspired how, as mayor, again, you focused on making that connection with people. You focused on rebuilding their trust. And I'm wondering now how you're doing that as senator during a time when people feel so disempowered, how you're ensuring that they feel like government, that you can still be responsive to their needs.
Well, so when you're a city, and we have a moderate-sized city, I love that I could go out. You know, I would be out at 3 o'clock in the morning on streets, meeting kids when they were coming to schools, and I could demonstrate for them that I'm here, I care. And by the way, I'm not going to live in one of the nicest places in Newark. I'm going to go, literally when I became mayor, I was living in the projects in the Central Ward, the neighborhood I live in now. But I said, you know what, let me look at the police statistics and find the area, one of the police sectors with the most shootings, the most impacted. And it was tough. I moved across the street from a public school where the principal told me stories about what it meant to have to try to get kids to have a system that if there's a stolen car or a gunshot, how do you get kids back off the playground in a rapid fashion? And so I think you earn a lot of trust with people. A wonderful quote by Alice Walker, who said, the most common way people give up their power is not realizing they have it in the first place. And we all have so much power to do little bits of good along our day. I always say the biggest thing you can do in any day is most often going to be a small act of kindness, decency, or love. And we've got to get back to a nation where the model we're exalting is not just the partisan flavor that you want, but also the values you want the entire nation to exhibit. We cannot devolve into a country that does whatever is necessary to win. We need to do a country that evokes a spirit, and I think of love, of goodness. I think that's what's going to ultimately elevate America. And so I just believe that when you create very serious dark problems for a society if you're focusing on your darker angels. I believe that the greater win is not just a political win, but when we elevate the best of who we are as a nation in our central civic space or politics. Let's evidence the best of who we are, not the worst values.
I think that's a great way to end it.
Great way to end it.
The best of who we are.
Amen.
Senator Cory Booker, thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you.
And now we're going to hear from Ben Wikler, who is the Washington director of an organization that many of us know from way back in the days. Maybe your first email address was used to reach out and do some online activism with this organization, MoveOn.org. He's a great friend, colleague, activist, dad, husband, and he's doing it all. So, friend, we are coming to you at an absolutely crazy moment. But I want to start, I'll let Igor go into that, but I actually want to start before that because you've been doing this work for quite some time. I think for most people, when I remember, or I try to remember my first impression of MoveOn, it was around the war in Iraq.
Yeah.
And I remember online organizing, and it was this new thing, and I had my Hotmail email, and it was like, that was the thing. So tell us a little bit about like how you came to do this resistance work.
Sure. So I'll tell the story of MoveOn and the story of Ben Wikler, and
Yes.
they intersect at a certain point.
There you go.
Hope so.
MoveOn almost was a website called censureandmoveon.org.
Censure and move on.
Yes. So just like, Justin Timberlake told Mark Zuckerberg to take the F off of the Facebook and just make a Facebook, Censure and Move On became MoveOn.org because it was just too long saying Censure and Move On. But it was about Bill Clinton's impeachment. It started as a petition in 1998 when Bill Clinton was being impeached by Republicans. And there were millions of people across the country who were like, this is insane. Do not impeach Bill Clinton. Just censure him and move on.
Right.
And that's how it started. They were trying to, figuring out what to do, and they were like, let's start this petition. All these people signed it, and suddenly they had hundreds of thousands of people on an email list, and people started emailing them saying, like, what's next? And they're like, next? We don't know what's next. I don't know. Bring the petition to your member of Congress.
Right,
so then all these people started showing up at congressional offices, and boom, there was online activism. They created the first credit card donation form for a political website. They figured out, they basically invented political email. They created a little box in the corner that has the, extra button that you can click.
Oh my goodness.
All this stuff.
Did not know. Yeah.
Came out of nowhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they figured out how to make event tools so you could ask people to show up at a particular place. And, the sort of early version of Meetup or Evite or what have you was in MoveOn's toolkit. So all this stuff was happening. Now, I actually got involved in activism and politics for the first time in the Jesse Jackson campaign when I was 7.
Come on, let's go.
When you were 7?
I was 7.
Bring
Well,
it
I mean,
on.
I wasn't involved, but I went to Jesse Jackson
Yeah.
Rally in
That's
Madison,
right.
Wisconsin, where I grew up.
That's
my mom
right.
took me, and
The Rainbow Coalition.
Absolutely.
Let
That's
'em
my,
know,
my
Ben.
first political memory.
That's
and
right.
it stuck with me.
That's right.
And I just, for me, I just love doing it. I'm like, I kind of get, out of my gourd when there's not a fight to run into, and when there's you can sort of fight for justice and be involved in something, and there's a problem to solve and allies to join with.
So you're really like
March.
the one happy person in DC.
Right
We
now.
found
It
him.
is like ironic and painfully true that it's exciting. I love feeling like I can be
It's
useful
a
in this kind of
revival.
stuff. It's a revival.
Yeah.
And I think, to me, I think the sustaining thing in activism is when you find like a community of people that can joyfully go into battle together, and you're fighting, for the country that you all envision, but it's not out of just anger or sadness or despair, but it's out of hope and love and belief that there's a better world that you can build together.
So deep. Both
So
of our
deep.
conversations,
Yeah.
the connecting force being love,
Yeah.
hope, optimism.
It's
not
not
what
just
we're talking-
hokey.
There you
Yeah,
go.
no, not what you often hear, but what's the sustaining
Yeah.
force?
But before we get to the current situation in Comey, I'm sure you do this a lot. You talk to these new advocates, the resistors. What piece of advice do you give them that if you wish you wish you knew then what you know now?
Yeah.
What's kind of, I mean, I'm sure there's not like a golden nugget here, but kind of guidelines for people who are asking themselves, as Michelle asked you, how do I keep this going?
I think I have an unusual thing that I would not recommend to most listeners, which is my job is literally to like jump from fire to fire. So I I was typing a Senate healthcare strategy while I was on a conference call to figure out what to do about the Comey investigations and the leak about Michael Flynn, shutdown. Like, that's actually not a great strategy unless you get paid to do that and it's your full-time job.
Unless that's
and
what
then it
you
kind of
do.
works. Yeah.
Right.
And that happens to be what I do.
Right.
I think if you're, I think I heard this on another podcast on Love It or Leave It. Someone had the suggestion of like figure out your main dish and then your side dishes. Mm-hmm. And so I think figuring out, the campaigns that win tend to be things where there's like sustained interest and attention.
That's
and
right.
You can think of it as like a hobby. You can, maybe you like to crochet or maybe you like to, I don't know, ice skate or maybe you like to dance, whatever thing it is. Like do that, put some time into it and actually like, that's how you're going to make a difference. And then keep some time for some side dishes where you show up. Mm-hmm. Like show up for the protest about sentencing reform. There's a protest on Tuesday.
That's right.
At noon here in DC. That's a good
right.
thing to go to. But you don't have to like show up to everything. Mm-hmm. Find a group. It is like just so much better
Find
to do
a
this
network.
stuff. Yeah.
You can't do this
Gotta
stuff
build
by
a
yourself.
community.
You can't
Yep.
do
By the way, this segment is called the Resistance Survival Guide. So I appreciate all the tips.
Absolutely.
But turning to the news at hand, to me it feels like the resistance, which began obviously after the election, after the Women's March, has been building up to, will Congress, the third branch of government or second branch of government, hold Trump accountable? And can the people pressure Congress to hold him accountable so there's actual consequences for what he does?
Yes.
Now we're really at the greatest example of that, where he has thrown away every constitutional democratic norm. Now we're in a place where there's some evidence suggesting that he may have tried to obstruct an investigation into his campaign's ties to Russia. And I'm sure you're hearing from your members, Michelle and I are hearing from folks we speak to, of people just being fed up and saying, well, maybe this is time for impeachment. And you see leaders in Congress being on both sides of that argument, as we heard here on the podcast. And I'm wondering, what is the best way to channel that energy, that newfound anger, that disgust, really, that I think a lot of Americans have around the country, that our president would behave in this way?
Yeah.
What can they do to kind of push these investigations forward, to move the ball forward on this?
So you should call them every day and ask for it. Like, they need to hear from their constituents. If they have a meeting, a town hall meeting in your district, go and ask about this. Talk about how passionately you care about this. Talk about how you try to teach your kids, to follow the law and to believe in the Constitution. Those values matter to almost all of us, right? And our representatives in Congress should be doing their part to actually hold the administration accountable on that basis. So there's a lot to do.
There's guides people can use now.
There are guides. Go
online.
Go to Indivisible Guide. Go to Resistance
Near me.
Resistance Near Me.
Resistance Near Me. Thank you. Go to MoveOn.org. We have a bunch of this material.
That's right.
Those are some easy things you can do right now. This is really a moment. I literally, just before this interview, I got off the phone with a reporter who was like, do you think there's going to be pressure from people the way there was on healthcare on this Russia Comey investigation stuff? And I was like, yes.
Without question.
Without question. But I was saying that only because I knew that the people listening to this podcast would take these actions, would do what is necessary.
Next step.
Because it only happens if we, citizens make it happen.
That's right.
Like this, the resistance doesn't resist itself.
It doesn't resist itself.
No.
This administration's not going to resist itself. That's what I'm looking for. The administration's not going to resist itself. It's up to all of us to do it.
That's
and
right.
it's amazing to see the outpouring of it. But to this question of how do you sustain energy, organizing a town hall, organizing a constituent town hall, and having hundreds of people show up, and having people chant, and having people tell their personal stories about like how the healthcare repeal would affect them, or how this like sentencing guidelines would affect them, and how much they care about this country, and the need for truth and accountability from the administration. Having people cheer when people make those statements, like that is energizing. You come out of that a little bit exhausted. You take a day off. You eat some ice cream. But then you're like,
Or macaroni and cheese.
macaroni
I
and
tell
cheese.
people.
Yeah,
Comfort
whatever's
foods.
necessary. Something with dairy. I'm from Wisconsin.
There you
Something
go.
that has dairy products in it. That's the important thing. You come out of that jazzed up.
That's right.
You know, it's like you believe in people again. When you see tons of people getting together to fight for shared values and like stand up for what they believe in, you're reminded that there's something worth fighting for here. And
We deserve
we can
better.
believe in ourselves that we deserve better.
That's right.
You know, and I think just seeing other people, acting in solidarity with other people can just remind you that there really is a community here that's worth fighting for, that we are in this together, and that there's a bigger vision and dream that animates us. That's where the energy comes from.
Ben Wikler, Washington director for MoveOn. Thank you, friend.
MoveOn.org.
MoveOn.org. Still holding it down.
Sometimes it feels like
threw that
MoveOn.org,
accent.
I will say.
Arr. You didn't know my last life. I was a pirate. So there was that. So, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Ben.
Thank you guys so much.
Well, Michelle, that felt really good.
This was a great inaugural episode.
And we want to hear from you. Email us at thinkingcap@americanprogress.org.
Let us know if there's someone that you want to hear from, a local leader, an elected official. Who should we bring on the next episode of Thinking Cap?
Thinking Cap is produced by Sally Tucker. Music by Kyle Epson and Jacob Buchanan. Graphics by Matt Ingram. For more, find us at Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, and at AmericanProgress.org, or wherever you want.